But I think the interest that I would particularly have in the work that Ma Zheng is doing is to understand how important it is that within China there are voices that can speak in an appropriate way and make a difference. It is true that the most significant factor about Ma Zheng is that he is well recognized within his country as speaking out courageously on issues and making a difference on the ground and giving leadership, the kind of leadership that is incredibly important because of the link between human rights and environmental concerns. So it's my great pleasure now, and indeed my honor, to invite him to be the second speaker in the speaker series. Ma Zheng.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's truly my honor to be invited as the speaker on the Mary Robinson Speaker Series, and I appreciate the invitation made by Business and Human Rights Resource Center. We have good working relationship, and today I expect, I thank you, all of you, for coming, and I look forward to having a good discussion. I want to update you about some of the challenges, environmental challenges we're facing in China, but also update you of some of the efforts made in China and the opportunities for all of us to try to work together to tackle all these challenges. The last 30 years have seen tremendous growth in our country. As Madam Robinson put it, it helped to put millions, hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, this economic development, definitely, and also helped to improve China's individual freedom. But having said that, it did put a lot of pressure on our fragile environment. All this breakneck economic development caused the increase of pollution discharge, a further stress of our resources, and also worsen our eco-degradation. Taking water as an example, we could see, this is the third largest freshwater lake, and within 20 years of time, it has been turned from the crystal clear water into a water laced with algae all the time. And when I was there, I saw all these fishermen. Instead of scooping out fish, they are paid by the government as a kind of alternative livelihood to scoop out dead algae. And any drop on their skin could cause problems. And the Lake Chao, the fifth largest freshwater lake, same thing, dead fish, algae, and all these poor fishermen. And the Lake Dingshi, every summertime, when I was there, I could see it has been turned into a green cesspool. We can go on and on with all this because it's simply the fact is that in our densely populated coastal regions in China, it's increasingly more difficult to try to find any clean water, clean rivers, and clean lakes, except in those reservoirs kept for centralized urban supply. And even that is being threatened at this moment. All this pollution will have consequences. I think consequences, the number one concern is on public health. When 300 million rural residents don't have access to safe drinking water, there will be health consequences. And when, quite a large number of our cities cannot even, reach the modest health air quality standards, there will be health consequences there, for sure. And then, when even the soil and aquifer got contaminated, when even the official data shows 12 million tons of crops, food crops, contaminated by heavy metals each year, there will be health consequences one day. And another concern is on resources. Again, taking water is an example. We could see 2/3 of our cities are in shortage of water. It spreads across China. In the south, humid south, it's very much a result of all this pollution discharge. And now, in some of our areas, especially the North China Plain, which hosts the big cities like Beijing and Tianjin are located, and which is a major center for energy and industry, and also a major breadbasket. This area is facing increasing a water challenge, and the overdrafting, overmining of the groundwater resources have reached over 100 billion tons over the past several decades, and now some of the regions, it could reach bedrock. This triggered the construction of 2 canals, each of them 1,200 kilometers long, to try to shift the water from the south, from the Yangtze River, to bail out this region. It has a lot of consequences, of course, to the south. One of that is relocation of 300,000 rural residents. It's not easy when in those densely populated areas to find them land for that. And increasingly, the south are in its own trouble. The pollution there, the kind of also all these southern cities are trying to divert water for their own use, and not just divert water from the south to the north. The southern areas are also making their own plans. This is a 400-kilometer long diversion canal to transfer water so as they could dilute all this, flush out all this pollution I just mentioned in one of the lakes. But this is a competition going on. And then we're having a threat to our social stability when all this so-called collective incidents triggered by environmental pollution and also the eco-degradation have threatened one of the most important things in China, that is, social stability. And last but not least, the global impact. All this pollution discharge, including our coal, you can see from the chart how our coal burning have been kind of doubled within 10 years of time. It's now topped 3 billion tons a year, and there will be global impact for sure. And China try to get involved. Try to grow into be integrated into this global community. But now we need to face this issue as well. So I think due to this increasing public awareness and demand from our people, and also I think taking all this serious social political consequences into consideration, the Chinese government have changed their policy, from development at whatever cost to move into more sort of balanced and sustainable development. And they try to even integrate environment target, including carbon, energy target, into our economic development plan. And there has been some real efforts made and some real results, some targets been met. Having said that, we haven't seen our rivers turn clean. We haven't seen our air quality getting better, because when we're on the way for another quadruple of our economy, and it simply offset all these efforts made. So it's not big enough. And when we look into some of the reasons for why so billions upon billions of dollars been spent, but our environment still hasn't been improved. One is scale of growth. The other is the lack of, there are some real gaps there. The barrier is not the lack of technology or even the lack of money. It's the lack of motivation. Motivation should come, from the enforcement of laws and regulations should come from the environmental litigation. But none of this are quite there, I have to say. None of them are quite there. So we have a real gap for all this all this motivation and how to generate that. Increasingly, there's an understanding that government agency single-handedly cannot solve all the problem. We need extensive public participation to supplement such a lack of motivation. And with that, some of the milestone legislation have been made, including environmental impact assessment law in the 2003 and environmental information disclosure measures in 2008. And we, as an NGO, we truly believe we need public participation. And we also believe the public can only be, participate in a meaningful way if they got informed. So information access is extremely important. It's a precondition for that. So with that in mind, we built up this so-called China water pollution map. One, as the first project after we set up our organization, providing people access to data for the national level, the provincial 31 provinces, and also 300 cities in different parts of China with access to data on water quality, including such a kind of maps which color the rivers according to their level of pollution and marine kind of pollution, and also the discharge data, which people can see, year on year, how much our total wastewater and COD are kind of going up and down. But what aroused more attention, the most attention, is the so-called blacklist, the list of enforcement data of all these companies in China. We started with 2,500, but now today it just topped 90,000 records of this, more or less records of violations, basically. The enforcement data are there. Environmental information transparency have been used first in this country, in America, in late 1980s as a way for environmental management, and then in Europe as PRTR, around 2000, all this data are available online. Now China still lacks the equivalent legislation, but we do work with other NGOs, try to put it together. This is the 10,000 factories and sewage plants which are responsible for 65% of water and air emission. We try to show people where they are. And we try to cross-link that with their enforcement, with their monitoring data, with the discharge data. People can see in their own eyes if this data fit in, they could check whether it's improving or they're not. And if we overlay this with this pollution map, you can see why some of our rivers running from the very source to the very end are running black, because there's so many polluters, major polluters, cleaning around them and taking some advantage of this increasing sort of new technology. We could use Google Earth map to pinpoint them, link them to each of these factories on our site. People can see in the arid north, in the humid south, along this major river waterways, what they look like, how they look like. And even in the western part of China, they started moving into our western part of China, all this major pollution. Okay, so people say, we have data now, but how do we generate motivation? This is, how could I, as an individual, join this? It's a big issue, air pollution, water, some of the thousands of miles of rivers. How could I join? And I believe that if we still don't have all the rights in China ensured, at least one right that you do have, that is your rights to consumption. You basically, when you buy things, it's your rights. And now at this moment, the increasing consumption in our country is actually making a pressure on our environment. Excessive consumption is coming up, and we need to tackle that. But more than that, we have, China is the factory of the world, making products for the entire Western world, dump waste in our backyards. So this consumption is having a pressure on the environment. But if we can use that in a responsible way, it could generate a motivation if we can responsibly consume. But people need information. I think we need to provide information. It's your choice, it's consumers' choice, but they don't know about some of the other sides. So now we need to provide them